Hello and welcome to Reefcraft. Today we're going to be talking about Staghorn Acropora Coral. Now this one was actually requested on one of my other videos. And I thought, hey, that's a pretty good idea, and I've got heaps of videos of different types of staghorns from around the world. Like the title of this video suggests, these guys are a type of Acropora. And they're one of many different types of growth forms of Acropora that you can get in our oceans. Now in the wild, their habitat can vary quite a lot. You can find them deeper, but most of the time you're finding them in these shallow areas. And it's really cool to see when they're growing on top of these parietes and Diploastria and things like that. This is actually quite common and a lot of people probably don't realize. Now the stags growing in the shallow water have to deal with a lot of different issues, especially water temperature. You can see that color band in this video here is actually the warm water on top and the cooler water down the bottom. At low tide, most of these corals are sitting in that warm band. And not to mention their close proximity to people. I mean, this is a city and this stunning reef is right here. And because of this, sometimes you find areas like this that are completely destroyed. You can see all the skeletons on the ground. But it's not all doom and gloom. A lot of restoration efforts actually happening around these areas. And Acropora, and particularly staghorns, are used quite regularly because they attract a lot of fish. Alright, enough about their habitat and their threats. Let's get on to the species. Now this one is a deep Acropora grandis. These guys spread out and expand over massive areas, and this is actually Acropora intermedia. This one is quite a common one in shallow areas and looks completely different when at this depth. I mean, here's another example of it at a shallow area. You can see it's just broken off from another colony and started growing on the ground there. This is also pretty typical of staghorn species. And they do break a lot in the shallow water, and that's typically because of big storm events or wave action that just spreads them around the reef. You can see all these Acropora intermedia, they kind of have this smooth, bumpy texture along the body of the acro, and then quite a short axial corallite. Now this next species is very similar, it's Acropora muricata. The growth form is very similar, but they do have different radial corallites where they're not as rafts and more tubular. And then this is just another example of one that's not as confined by the other species and can actually grow out and spread out a bit more. Now this next species is Acropora robusta, a super recognizable species. They typically have this green with the pink tips, and they grow very, very thick, and depending on the types of wave action that they're in, they can actually be thicker. This one's a little bit deeper. You can see those pink tips and a slightly darker green base, but still your typical robusta. And next we have this stunning Acropora microthalma, or at least I think it is. It's that one on the left. And those damselfish were giving me absolute hell. Now another super recognizable species is Acropora florida. Now this one's growing horizontally, so you wouldn't really call it a staghorn, but when it's shallower water, it tends to grow like this. And this is a pretty standard color for it. They have these knobbly protruding corallites all the way up and down their branches that almost make it look like it has branchlets. And this one's just in a slightly different habitat. It's a bit deeper, but look how many types of damselfish are on here. I can count at least 3 different schools. I don't know how many you can get. And just another shot of it. A lot of the time you actually find them with other species of Acropora, and this one in the center here, I actually cannot ID. I can't find anything that remotely looks similar to it, so if you do know, let me know. Now this next one's actually a very cool example of how different environments change different Acropora species. This Abrotanois is growing in very shallow water, and then this is more typical of its species, looking a bit more like a pine tree, a bit bushier. And they also come in this awesome blue color morph. This is Acropora tortuosa, one of my favorite Acroporas to find. It lives in slightly deeper waters. And this one I found on a remote island off New Caledonia. I'm not going to try and pronounce that name, but it's a very needle-like, very fine species of Acropora, and in this stunning blue color. These are Acropora pulchra. Now these are 2 different color morphs of the same species growing right next to each other, so it kind of goes to show how much variation it is in the species. You also have these ones that are growing in slightly shallower. You got the intermedia down the bottom and then the pulchra up the top. Now these guys were pretty common around this island in New Caledonia, and they had these little threadfin cardinalfish living in amongst the branches. Now this species is Acropora abrolensis. Again, very similar to muricata and intermedia, but these guys actually have a long extended tubular axial corallite. And here's just another example of the same species, just a slightly different color morph. This next species kind of reminds me of the ones in Harry Potter. It's Acropora lovely, I'm pretty sure. Not 100%, but it's a good guess. This next one is Acropora stera. These guys kind of have that bumpy texture you can see all the way along the branches. They also have quite an extended axial corallite at the very end, and seem to be pretty rare. Acropora of Hawaii, like this one here, I believe doesn't get enough credit. They are a stunning Acropora that you just don't see or hear about very often. And then just to rattle off a few other species, you got Acuminata here, very spiky, very protruding, and quite common around New Caledonia, I found. Acropora archigemensis tends to grow pretty thick around the base and then sprawl out. And then one of my favorites of all time, Acropora divaricata. I've done this one before in different videos, and I just find them absolutely stunning. And then this one, you can kind of see an Acropora pulchra right underneath, but then you've got an Acropora youngii. Now these guys grow everywhere, and they can actually also grow in cold water environments. Here are some sprawling colonies that you wouldn't realize are actually from Rottnest Island. Now they actually get down to about 16 degrees in temperature, but range all the way up to 24. And when you find them in Fiji, Indonesia, obviously they're in upwards of close to 30 degrees, which just shows the variation in this particular species. Now nearing the end here, I just thought I'd throw in this Chimera. It's the species with two different colour morphs in the same colony. And then I actually had a UV torch when I was in Fiji and went around filming different staghorns with this. I thought this would be interesting for anyone that has, a marine tank and keeps these sort of species in their reef tanks, because, I mean, look at that thing, it's stunning. Alright, that's all I've got for this one. Remember to like and subscribe, and leave me a comment if there's any particular species or animals that you want to see more of. I'll throw something together, or I'll get out there filming. Alright, I'll catch you on the next one.